Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Welcome in this second or third day of this wonderful conference, of this wonderful event where I have seen that interaction is possible even remotely. I'm still very emotional from yesterday and the day before. We made wonderful conclusions. The interaction was perfect. And what I keep is that leadership needs to be collaborative. So this is an example. This international event of so many participants from so many countries. It is you as well that lead this wonderful event with your commitment, your participation, respecting the time. And I couldn't be more thankful for all the wonderful people I have met. I have met again, because some of you, I know you many years, but we prove what we are with our everyday actions and activities. So thank you everybody. So let's briefly outline some important details of our program for the day. We have said yesterday as well the same things, but as we know, repetition is the mother of knowledge. So we really try to respect time. So the program. Presentations should give the main idea of our research. We have about 15 minutes maximum to present, and we keep questions, if any, for the end of each session. The chairs, if you have been selected to be a chair, please remember that the most important is to be able to keep the time. Additionally, you will be given the rights as a co-host to lead your session. For the parallel sessions, as we had the experience yesterday, the chairs should record the meeting in her computer. This is not difficult to do, but we need it as we record all the conference, and we will have the opportunity and the possibility to see it, especially people who are, for example, in Canada or in USA, and the timelines are very different. So we understand that they cannot be here throughout the conference. We will use the chat to write down our questions and interact. You are very active there, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I feel you like if you were beside me. I invite you to stay and interact throughout this conference. We have many music breaks to relax and stretch, so to be able to interact better, because I know, believe me, it's very tiring being remote, but since this is our new reality, we will do it giving the best of ourselves. And thank you for being the best of yourselves. You are free to turn off your cameras for some periods, as we all need a bit of privacy sometimes. Nevertheless, I always prefer to see your faces and reactions to be able to interact. I will ask if our dear Dr. Michael Nevradakis is here. Because I don't know. Normally I contacted him, but not still. Anyway, while waiting for Dr. Nevradakis, because he will be connecting, I would like a bit of interaction and what is your thoughts?
Not working, eh? Lucia.
What are your thoughts about the experience we had? I mean, I'm still, as I said, very emotional of all this event, and I would like a bit of Carl, if you would like to say something, if you are listening to me, Carl. A bit of interaction, a morning interaction, at least for me. It's 9 p.m. here. What are your, we cannot listen to you, your microphone is, okay.
Yep, but now it should work, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, this is, in the background, this is the situation normally between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock in Copenhagen, and normal days, meaning rush hour on the bike lanes. And as you know, Amsterdam and maybe Copenhagen are the capitals of biking. And biking not only for sports, but especially as a normal transport. And I think Steen Sauerberg would agree on that one. So, but it's all about infrastructure, because if the infrastructure, for example, as in Copenhagen, helps people to bike, to commute by bike, then they do it, even in winter.
Yes, I might add, in Copenhagen, between 50 and 60% would use their bikes to get to work. But Amsterdam is slightly better than us.
Yes, they are. And here comes a joke. It's a bad joke, but nevertheless, you know that the number of giving birth to children by Cesarean, meaning by an operation, is higher in Amsterdam than in Copenhagen. Why? You know, when children in Amsterdam, when they are born, they come on a bike. And that's hard for a woman to give birth to a child with a bike.
Okay.
I didn't know.
So therefore, there has to be an operation. So, and this is an example of lying with statistics, right? Looking at some numbers and then trying to say, okay, if A, then B, and here we have the conclusion. For example, in northern Germany, they looked in the 70s. They looked at the number of storks, you know, the bird, and then when the number of storks increased, at the same time the number of babies increased, of giving birth increased. So conclusion: where does the babies come from? They still come with the stork.
Yes, I might add exactly that example. I had used some 20 years ago to one of my students who mentioned that on my Facebook, and say that made her think in critical terms. And also, it's just called spurious correlation.
Yes.
Okay, somebody else that would like to share an idea, an emotion out from this interaction that we had and we continue to have before Dr. Nevradakis, that I see that he's here, takes the role of the workshop leader. Angelica?
I could share that I'm in Greece. I choose this time Thessaloniki area, and I'm watching to the window, nice beach, and it is really good feeling that I choose to be on the conference, not walking along the beach.
Wonderful. So we are not far away. I'm in Athens, you are in Thessaloniki, the second, as we say, capital of Greece. And thank you for being there. And I'm sure we will have a great interaction today as well.
By the way,
Okay.
how is it in Greece at the moment? How much?
Who is talking?
Well, can I just say what I read and it scared me? Today is forecast in Athens to reach 42 degrees. And other parts of Greece will go up to 44 and beyond.
Yes, it is very hot. It is actually, it's a very hot week. And I think Thessaloniki had a cut of electricity yesterday because of the many air conditioning and electricity use. So I'm glad this didn't happen in Athens because we are connected virtually. And I prayed yesterday, said, yes, God, thank you.
Yes, it is. It seems that it is the same in the Balkans, but I could tell you that here near the sea, it's really pleasant in the morning and in the evening. And if you choose to stay during the day somewhere hidden from the sun, it is pleasant.
Okay. Okay.
May I ask a little? How much of Greek is closed down because of the coronavirus?
I could say my personal experience. Everything here is going according the rules. I'm in hotel and they behave like it is it is a corona COVID situation. The beach, everybody is behaving properly, and I really have a feeling that it is a care about the situation. And of course, if everybody of us care about ourselves, it seems that it is manageable.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I will ask Dr. Navradakis to start the workshop. Dr. Michael Navradakis, editor and writer, Orthos Logos News, Greece and USA. He will be presenting, and he has worked on this workshop with Dr. Konstantinos Alexopoulos, founder and director of publication of Orthos Logos. Dr. Navradakis will speak about the importance of sharing and the role of constructive journalism. Dr. Navradakis, the floor is yours.
Okay, wonderful. So good morning, everyone. First of all, thanks for this opportunity to present this workshop on constructive journalism, which is also known as solutions journalism. As Margarita mentioned, I am currently an editor and writer for an outlet that is based in Greece known as Orthos Logos News. Let me first explain what Orthos Logos means. There's no real exact translation from Greek to English, but it roughly translates to rational rhetoric. And the idea behind Orthos Logos is to follow this philosophy of constructive or solutions journalism, which I will introduce as part of the workshop today, to present a type of journalism that is unfortunately rather uncommon in Greece and in other countries as well. I'm not singling Greece out. Journalism that steers away from the sensationalism that one often finds in the media in most countries, and which really focuses on presenting not just the problems in the world around us, but also potential solutions to those problems. So let me share, hopefully this will work, a presentation, my presentation. Okay, so I've put together a presentation. Dr. Alexopoulos, by the way, Mr. Alexopoulos, by the way, from Orthos Logos, who is our head editor, is not available today, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to run this presentation solo. But the idea here is to first get an introduction to what this so-called constructive journalism or solutions journalism is, and then by the end of today's workshop to be able to participate in a bit of a thought exercise that will be based on the knowledge that you will pick up regarding what solutions journalism or constructive journalism is. And you might hear me refer to constructive journalism, solutions journalism. They're essentially the same thing. One terminology, constructive journalism, is used more often in the European context, and solutions journalism is used more often in the US context, but they're referring to the same type of journalism. So they're not two different things really, but there's just two different preferred terminologies for it. So you can't really do this right now, but I can send this, actually I could, if you just give me a second, I could actually send this link to everyone in the chat, if I can get to it. If it lets me. It's something that you could just do while we're talking. There we go. It's an interesting quiz. I'll just send it. That basically takes a look at what our perceptions of the world around us are. So there's different questions about types of things like life expectancy and what we think it is, and so forth. And what you'll find as you take this quiz is that you'll probably end up with a lot of wrong answers. And it's not because you're not knowledgeable about the world. It's not because you're not educated. It's not because you're not aware. As we'll see, most people that take this quiz really do not do very well because people have a tendency to think that things are worse than they actually are.
We haven't, sorry to interrupt, we haven't received the link at the chat, Michael. If this was your intention.
Actually, he sent the link, but he sent on the wrong chat. So let me try to send back the link.
Okay.
So
keep going, Michael.
Okay, thanks for that. So basically, there's a perception in most of us that things are worse in the world around us than they actually are. And this is a perception that is fueled in large part by the media, because when the media does sensationalize and over-dramatize a lot of things and presents a constant stream of doom and gloom and just bad news, and doesn't present any solutions to that bad news, then it does create this perception that things are worse than they actually are. So there was a study conducted based on this Gapminder test. There's 12 questions in all. And as you can see, most people taking this, this test answered between 0 to maybe 5 questions correctly out of the 12. Above 5, you see the numbers dramatically decline. No one in that study got 12 out of 12. One person got 11 out of 12. But a lot of people were in that range between 0 and 3. Interestingly enough, a random chimpanzee that took this quiz got 4 out of 12. So 80% scored worse than just like a random, than the random answers provided by chimpanzee. Only 10% did better than 4 out of 12. So this goes to show, again, this is not a sign that people are stupid or that they're uneducated or that they're not aware of anything around them, but it is a sign that our view of the world, our worldview, is in many cases heavily shaped by the media, either directly or indirectly. We may not watch a lot of TV, we may not read many newspapers or online news sites, but we nevertheless kind of nevertheless, this impression kind of filters down on us, that everything around us is really, really bad, and ultimately actually much worse than things are if one looks at objective statistics and figures regarding different measures of the world around us. So we think things are worse than they actually are. We've already begun explaining a little bit as to why that is. So, as you'll see here, just negativity abounds in the media because it sells in many cases, or at least the media ecosystem believes that this sort of negativity sells. It catches attention, it draws people's interest, and it's just one of those things where it becomes a self-reinforcing situation where there appears to be a demand for bad news or sensational news from the media. The media meets that demand. By meeting that demand, it kind of just reinforces this view that things are bleak. You see that word bleak there on the New York Times headline, or after so much sadness, what is there to be thankful for? And certainly during the pandemic, this has probably gotten even worse in a lot of cases. I could certainly talk about Greece and how, sorry for saying this, but how absurdly sensationalist the media has often been. I don't think it really helps the situation at all, but it appears to be a successful formula for them. So I have a quote here from a journalist, Ola Rosling. Even if nobody's lying, it's very easy to get the impression that the world is getting worse, because that's the impression that's often given in sort of the way the world around us is mediated. News is all up. Here's another quote, Rob Weinberg from Der Correspondent, which is a solutions journalism outlet that is based in the Netherlands. News is all about sensational, exceptional, negative, and current events. And those 5 words capture precisely the problem with news. The news is one crazy, unrelated event after another. So what is this actually leading to? Multiple studies have shown that we are actually disengaging from the news. So in one such study, participants were asked the question, what feelings are evoked when you watch or read the news? So you see that word cloud at the bottom of the screen, and some of the most prominent responses include frustration, sadness, fear, anger, anxiety, sad or sadness, which we also see. You see sad and sadness actually both very prominently featured here. And then to a lesser extent, you see overwhelming, helpless, hopeless, and so forth. So this is reflective of how there may be a demand on the part of the public, or at least segments of the public, for this sort of sensational news, but at the same time, it comes with a cost, and the cost is an emotional cost that you can see here in through this word cloud. So let me ask, and anyone can chime in and participate here, how you would describe each of the following, and we can begin with the word sensationalism. I've used that word a few times so far in the presentation today. How would you actually define or describe sensationalism? Anyone that wants to participate, feel free. Okay, does anyone want to share their thoughts on this? Yes, I see a hand.
Does it mean about the emotions, motivating or affecting emotions, maybe?
Okay, I like that explanation. Sensationalism does play on emotions and senses. It comes from the word senses. So it sort of plays on this sensory overload that it can provide to the audience, and how it plays on the senses and the emotions of the human to really sort of get them to be engrossed by and really sort of very caught up in a story, whatever story that may happen to be. How about negativity bias? I haven't used that phrase yet, but it's going to come up in our discussion in just a few moments. But if anyone has heard that phrase before, or if anyone would like to try a guess as to what they think negativity bias is referring to, please feel free. Any thoughts?
I think it could be.
Yes. Well,
Go ahead, Sten. Go ahead, Sten.
Okay. I would draw attention to a very important article by Johan Galtung and Marie Holmboe-Ruge. It's an old one, but it's a classical one on criteria of news. And it fits very well with all kinds. It's actually originally based on foreign news, but it is very general. And it's some of the things that you say, but it is trying to subdivide into 12 categories, the different ones that in sensationalism, for example, if we take that as the catchword for all of it. And then negativity is a part of that. And what he's got, or they've got, is that it is something that is the big bad wolf instead of the small lame lamb. So the big bad wolf will actually get much more attention than the small, nice lamb.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much for that explanation, and I think it's a very accurate one. So when the media is often accused of having a negativity bias in a sense that there's a favoritism on the part of editors and people that are in charge of news content to focus on the negative stories because the positive stories are seen as something that just does not sell as much. And we'll go further into a discussion about that as we go forward. How about that third term that we see on the screen, news avoidance? What do you think that is referring to? And we'll see that coming up as well, but any thoughts? Vagelos, I see your hand.
Well, I have something in my mind actually since the beginning, and that is that I do not look at all news as being neutral. I have lived in many places, many countries, where the press is controlled by the government. Okay. Now, obviously, their attempt at sensationalism would be on the positive side. So I would talk about a propaganda positivity bias. That would lead to the third one that you have put here, news avoidance. I don't want, and I do not watch certain channels, for instance, because I just have my personal evidence to disbelieve what they are reporting. I'll give you one example easily. I and my wife had to ride 3 different buses yesterday. And 2 out of 3 were absolutely against the rules. And no one was checking, no one was making a comment. All seats on the buses were occupied. The bus was packed. I mean, we were touching each other's bodies, faces, and so on. Okay. Now, you don't get that in the news. So I'm trying to sort of, I'm not playing the devil's advocate, but a little bit of that also. And trying to say that there is also the other side, the other perspective. And I'm not being sensationalist by bringing this actual example that I experienced so recently. Do you see what I mean, Michael?
Yes, and that's an excellent point, because news avoidance is not something that happens only in situations where the media has a negativity bias. It happens more broadly in situations where the public has begun, or at least a segment of the public has begun, to just not trust the content that is being provided in the news. So it could be, for instance, very well something that we also see in contexts where news is very heavily controlled by the state and is overly positive to the point, again, of being completely unrealistic to the reality of, the world around, the world that people see with their own eyes around them. So news avoidance is something that we'll see coming up in the next few slides. The Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, alongside Oxford University, conducted a few years ago a major survey that looked at reasons behind news avoidance in different countries around the world. So this was a survey that they conducted in, I forget, it must have been around 40 countries, if I remember correctly. And they looked at, first of all, the percentage of people that would state that they were avoiding the news, and then the reasons why they were doing so. So we can see some of those reasons on the screen. We don't have to spend too much time on them, but it can have a negative effect on my mood, or I can't rely on news to be true. That's number 2. So this issue of trust. I don't feel there's anything I can do about it. So helplessness. Graphic images upset me. So sometimes the news is getting so sensational that people just literally can't stand it anymore. It leads to arguments I'd rather avoid. So this sort of polarization that often takes place, that constructive and solutions journalism tries to avoid. It disturbs my ability to concentrate on more important things, and it consumes too much of my time. So all of these were listed as key reasons behind news avoidance, and news avoidance is fairly high worldwide, and between 2017 and 2019 at least. I don't know if this trend continued over the past 2 years, but at least up until 2019, news avoidance was on the increase in most countries and overall on a worldwide basis. So the total out of the 40 or so countries that were included in this survey saw an increase from 29 to 32% between 2017 and 2019. Notice that in the US, that percentage is even higher, and in the UK, that percentage was lower but became higher than a world average during that 2-year period. Even in a country like Japan, where there were very high levels of trust in the news media, that number nevertheless also significantly increased during that period. Interestingly, decreased in Greece during that period, but it is very high, the second highest in the world. And I could do a whole separate presentation as to why it's so high in Greece, but it's beyond the point right now. The point is that in most countries around the world during this 2-year period, there is this trend toward higher news avoidance. And think about what types of stories would have been in the news during this 2-year period, at least in terms of international news. I can't speak about the domestic news in most countries, but 2017 to 2019 was a period where we just saw a lot of polarization in many societies worldwide. If we look at the UK as an example, the UK, this was the aftermath of the referendum on Brexit. It was an issue that divided the public very much and still does. So one can understand that there would be a percentage of people that will just at some point get so tired of this, tune out, because, for instance, it might have led to, as we see on the chart, arguments that they'd rather avoid, arguments over Brexit, arguments over politics. It can have a negative effect on my mood, this constant back and forth bickering. It consumes too much of my time. Certainly, these are the types of stories that can really consume one's entire being almost, if you really sort of allow these stories to do so. So this was a period of time, same in the US, a very politically polarized time, where polarization and sort of these social schisms really came to the forefront, and they seem to be a major contributing factor to this news avoidance and this increase in news avoidance that was recorded during this period. These are some quotes from participants from that study. And I've highlighted just some of the key words and phrases that they've used: negative impact on mood and mental health, or every story has and every headline has a negative word embedded in it. A fear factory, salacious, draining, frustrated, helpless, helpless once again. So these are responses that are reflective of the general sentiment that a lot of just ordinary people had when they were asked to comment on the news and how it made them feel. The New Yorker ran, this is a quote from the New Yorker: "Everything is horrible, worse than we ever imagined, and there's not a damn thing we can do about any of it. But whatever happens, we can't give in to despair," highlighting the word despair. So, with that extended intro, this is what brings us to solutions journalism or constructive journalism. And again, we can pretty much use those terms interchangeably. So there's a network of journalists and outlets known as the Solutions Journalism Network. And their mission statement actually gives us a very good idea of what it is that solutions journalism or constructive journalism actually does, which is to legitimize and spread the practice of solutions journalism, rigorous reporting about responses to social problems and their associated results. So I will focus here on the word responses rather than the word problems. The focus is on the response and not the problem itself. So solutions or constructive journalism has 4 qualities, and I've highlighted those words in each of these little bubbles on the screen. So solution journalism covers a response to a problem and how it happened. It provides evidence of impact. So looking at the effectiveness of, let's say, a policy that was implemented and not just the intentions of that policy. Solutions journalism produces insights that can help others respond. So the idea is, let's say you're writing about a city that tackled a problem with homelessness or with food waste or some other issue. Providing insights that other parts of the world that may be experiencing a similar issue may be able to perhaps draw upon and implement in their own region. And then finally, solutions journalism points out any limitations or caveats of the response. In other words, it's not attempting to sugarcoat the response to whatever problem is being responded to. The idea is also to point out that, yes, this could be a solution, but it could perhaps be a limited solution, or it may not be easy to incorporate or to implement in all contexts. So this is not propaganda journalism like the type that Evangelos talked about before. Oh, everything is great, there's nothing to worry about. No, it does not shy away from the problems or the limitations inherent in any solution that is attempting to tackle those problems. But it does also attempt to point out that there are solutions, that this is not just an endless, hopeless situation. So another way of thinking about what solutions journalism or constructive journalism is doing is that it tells the whole story, and whole is an acronym where W refers to what response does it address, H is how that solution works, O is that it offers insight, L is that it includes limitations, and E is that it provides evidence of that impact. So together we spell out the word whole. I don't need to spend too much time on this, but these are just some other things that a solutions journalism reporter or journalist would focus on or potentially focus on when preparing a solutions story, such as, where did this idea for the solution come from? Has it been done elsewhere, and with what effect or with what impact? Is there research that has been done on this issue, and what does the research say? What do the critics of the research say? And in what way and with what metrics can we determine that a response is working or not working? So these are just some of the examples of what would be asked. Tina Rosenberg is the co-founder of the Solutions Journalism Network, and she has said you can't just cover problem after problem, leading people into despair and passivity, and just wave goodbye after that. You owe the audience more than that. Solutions journalism is showing there are people responding to problems and there are things that are working. So a good way to understand what solutions journalism is to see what it isn't. It's not hero worship. So it's not one person that is doing superhuman feats of humanity or science or anything. But instead it might use people that are involved in a process of change and in a process of providing a solution as examples of that broader systemic change that is taking place. Solutions journalism is not a silver bullet. So what do I mean by silver bullet? It's not just, we see, for instance, a story on the left-hand side of the screen, joy that lasts on a porous the playground. Sometimes a soccer ball is more than just a ball, sometimes it's a lifesaver. So I'm sure that article was a little bit more, went a little bit more deeply than what the headline and subheadline is leading us to believe, but someone just reading the headline and the subheading would come away thinking, oh, all you have to do is to, you know, if you come across like a community of poor children somewhere, just give them a soccer ball to play with and everything will be fine. And obviously that is not the case, but you don't even want to give the reader, the audience, the impression that a solution is as simple as just giving poor children a soccer ball. So you can tone down the rhetoric by sort of providing a more nuanced headline, as we see on the right-hand side of the screen, for instance. So how do you make an indestructible soccer ball that, you know, kids in poor communities can play with without worrying that the ball is going to fall apart after a week? You start with Crocs. Though Crocs are these sort of like plastic shoes that are very common in some countries. Solution journalism is also not a theory. This is not theoretical writing. It's about something that is already in progress. In other words, something that's practical, something that already exists and it has been attempted or is being attempted. It's not activist journalism, and we see so much of it and have seen so much of it in the past few years. It shies away from the activism and it shies away from it taking political sides as much as possible. It's not a favor for a friend, so it's not like, you know, sort of like the angel investor that came in because someone had an idea, didn't have money, friend of his with money or an angel investor with money swoops in, here, take my money and invest it in your great idea. It's not that sort of solution because it's not a solution that is feasible or practical or possible for everyone. And it's not journalism about sort of like the afterthoughts of society. So it's not just a feature story where a journalist might go inside a prison and interview prisoners that are working and producing, I don't know, whatever, greeting cards or whatever. So it's not sort of like this human interest piece that the media often like to carry. It's something a little bit more substantial than that. And it's not, talking about human interest, it's not this type of story either, as cute and as heartwarming and wonderful as it may be. Disabled pig learns to use a wheelchair. Very heartwarming, but it's not solutions journalism. It's human interest journalism. So examples of solutions journalism, we see a sort of like a contrast here in how a very similar story was carried by two different outlets. And this is very recent, as you can see. On the left-hand side, EU countries delaying halting vaccinations over delivery shortages. That's a problem-oriented approach. Compare that to the right-hand side, how Denmark is administering vaccines at 3 times the rate of Ireland. Notice how that is a solutions-oriented approach. And because it's solutions-oriented, it's a more positive perspective on a very similar story. So the difference between those two types of journalism and those two types of approaches is that the solutions approach, or the constructive journalism approach, leaves audiences feeling inspired rather than depressed. So it comes back to sensationalism in a sense that we're still trying to have an impact on the human senses, but a more positive impact, leaving audiences inspired, making them feel that change is possible, that not everything in the world is so negative all the time, balancing the media image of the world. So it's not trying to look at the world with rose-colored glasses in a way that propaganda media might be trying to do in a lot of countries around the world. It tries to provide a more balanced view. Not everything is negative, not everything is positive either, but there are solutions and there are people working on solutions to various social issues and social problems around us. And by presenting this sort of balanced view, it's trying to tell the whole story, going back to that acronym we saw a few moments ago, whole. It's journalism that really tries to look at the whole story and not just the negative or not just the positive aspect of it. So it's a solution story if it features not just a problem, but a response to a problem and how it happened. It provides available evidence of results, not just intentions. It produces insights that can help others respond. So doing more than just providing inspiration, but actually also encouraging similar responses. And it discusses limitations. It's not propaganda. It's not just saying, oh, everything's great, this is a wonderful solution, and whoever came up with it is brilliant, and it just avoids that sort of journalism. So one additional way of thinking about the difference between solutions journalism and non-solutions journalism is sort of the journalism that most of us are accustomed to. We might consider it watchdog journalism in the sense that the media has long seen itself as having a role of the watchdog over politicians and governments and major actors in society. But we can look at solutions journalism more as a guide dog. In other words, helping to guide society toward solutions, credible solutions that are evidence-based and so forth, for different problems around us. So I'm going to skip ahead because there's just a lot of examples over here that are repetitive. And I really just want us to get into, with the time that we have left, which is about maybe 13 minutes or so. And I can make this available to everyone, by the way, after the conference. I want us to just have some time to have a discussion based on a thought exercise that I have put together, which is a remarkably simple thought exercise. So I'm just getting to that final slide because these are just example after example after example. And then just some tips for what a solutions journalism writer or journalist would do. I want us to just go straight to the thought exercise because I think by now we have a pretty good idea of what solutions journalism is, or at least what it attempts to be. So in the time that we have left, about 12 or 13 minutes from what I see on my clock here, let's take a controversial issue. And the issue that we had been discussing as we were putting this conference together is the issue of the Elgin Marbles, also known as the Parthenon marbles or Parthenon sculptures, or however you prefer to refer to them. It's a highly charged issue, in case you're not familiar with it or not very familiar with it, referring to sculptures that have been taken from the Parthenon to the British Museum at a time where Greece was still not an independent country, was still part of the Ottoman Empire. The British Museum, where these sculptures are housed to this day, puts forth the argument that they were legally obtained by Lord Elgin, hence the name Elgin Marbles, from the legitimate governing authorities of Greece or the Greek territory at that time. The argument, of course, that it's often put forth by Greece and by people that are kind of sympathetic to the Greek side is that this is a very important piece of Greek and world history that should be returned to its rightful, as they would put it, rightful home where they were taken from, and that they were taken illegally, and that Greece was not an independent country when this took place. So there's been arguments back and forth, and these are arguments that have really reached the diplomatic level, not just now, but going back quite a few decades. And nothing has really budged, either on the Greek side or on the British side, on this issue for many years. There's been periods over the past few decades where this issue comes back to the forefront for whatever reason. For instance, in the 1980s, Greece had a famous culture minister by the name of Melina Mercouri, who was sort of moving ahead with a major international campaign to repatriate these sculptures. If anyone has been on the Athens metro or Athens subway system, the Acropolis metro station has actually replicas of those sculptures, and then has like her image on the wall, Melina Mercouri's image. There's been some other times since then where this issue has come back again to the forefront, and then it kind of just disappears from the news again. But it's a controversial issue. And there's arguments that are being made that could be considered very strong arguments on both sides. So the idea here is not for us to solve this dispute over the sculptures. We're not going to be able to, and certainly we're not going to be able to in about 10 or 12 minutes. The idea here is, let's put on our thinking caps and think about, let's say, we just finished solutions journalism school, and now we're solutions journalists, and we want to write a solutions-based article about this controversial issue. The thought exercise here is, how can we approach an issue as controversial as this, that really sort of heats up people's emotions on both sides? How can we approach an issue like this in a constructive manner, based on what we have just learned and been introduced to today about solutions or constructive journalism? So who would like to get the ball rolling here with any thoughts about this?
Yes.
Yes, Dean, go ahead.
Thank you. We have discussed that already, where there was a full seminar on it. It had some problems technically, and also, I think, substantially. And I am actually right now writing on the chat, and you are so right about the story. Melina Mercouri was the Greek Minister of Culture from 1981 to 89, and again from 93 to 94. And there was which was called a very damaging interview with her and the director of the British Museum, televised in 1983. And she was asked beforehand not to raise it publicly, but the ambassador said she might do it in private, but she did it very much. And it was one of her most important points in her career. So it's a very strong point for the Greeks, and I do understand.
Okay, Steve, thank you for that. Other thoughts on a possible way of approaching an issue that is as politically and culturally and just so heated and so politically and culturally charged? We're just using this as an example. This sort of thought process could be applied to any type of controversial issue, but any thoughts on how a solutions approach could be applied to a story or a topic such as this?
One way could be to look at the historical background of it. Now, I do not mean the ancient background, but the cultural background. What does it mean for the British Museum? What does it mean for, let's say, many people in Greece? And try to get an understanding why it's not only about the Parthenon marbles, but really it's about colonial history on the one side. And on the other side, it's also, yeah, you could also say critically to the Athens part, to the Greek part, you could say it's also a question of nationalism. And this is a hot topic in these times, not only in Greece, of course. So, but this is the problem is this is only talking, appealing to the logos, and not to the emotions.
Yes.
So I have no idea how to rationalize the emotions, but maybe going back to history and trying to explain this is a symbol for very different things and different interests. And even, by the way, Stephen Fry was one of the British well-known guys that were on the side of the Greeks, and he got trouble. So also showing, for example, in Greece, that there are supporters, prominent supporters for an understanding in the British world, and not all the Brits are idiots, could also be an angle.
May I add?
Yes.
Thank you. It has been on the agenda for UNESCO for the last 30, 40 years to return to the original owners of any kind of art objects and beyond that. So it's still a hot issue. And I think it's also a very emotional issue and economic and political. It's got the whole range of, of different motives in it.
But that leads me to another idea, showing examples where the UNESCO succeeded, where things were given back to the owners, states or private persons. And there, fortunately, there are many good examples, not only good examples, there are also bad examples, but many good examples in Germany when it comes to Beutekunst from the Second World War, but also now back to the German colonial times in Africa. So there are examples where the original owners got at least parts of it back. And sometimes the best stories are when those original owners said, thank you very much, but we will give it to you, we borrow it to you so that it still can be in your museum, let's say a month, a year or something like that. Telling these stories, constructive, positive stories, could also help.
Right, I do think that would be an excellent solutions-based approach. One could look at examples of other cultural and ancient and historic artifacts that were returned at some point and what the impact was, first of all, on the home country that repatriated those artifacts, on the country that gave them back, and also looking at the agreement that was made. So for instance, were those artifacts still allowed to be exhibited from time to time by the museum that was housing them? Or did they make an agreement where that museum or that institution and that country would share artifacts with each other that would go on display at that museum in some sort of a rotation, for instance? what was the impact in terms of even things like visitor traffic to the museum or public perception of that institution or that museum after such an agreement? Did it actually go up? Did this help the country that repatriated those artifacts to increase, for instance, visitors or tourism to their historic sites? Did it help in any sort of way in terms of just the way people in those countries might feel about their own history? Did it lead to any changes in educational curricula in those countries, for instance? Did they take advantage of the repatriation of such objects to sort of reintroduce them to their own societies and to sort of incorporate them into education and other aspects of society? So there's a lot of possible approaches over here that go away from what most people would think of when they hear about this issue, and they might be aware that there's a conflict or disagreement over this issue between Greece and the UK, and this has been going on for a very long time. But a lot of reporting on this issue over the years really hasn't gone beyond that surface level look at the issue. So, and as we've already discussed, and maybe anyone else would like to add a few more ideas before we wrap up, there's other approaches to the story that are really more constructive and that would look at aspects of this issue that go beyond just the dispute. And by the way, looking at the sort of evidence of other cases where objects and artifacts were returned and repatriated, you know, that is very much part of the solutions approach, looking at how similar solutions were implemented elsewhere in similar instances and what the results were in those instances. So that absolutely would be a solutions approach. Are there other thoughts? Yes, Carl.
Actually, I have two thoughts. One is just a story, and the other one is back to Galtung and Ruge.
Just to conclude a little bit, because we have a small break.
Okay, I make it short. So Galtung and Ruge are speaking of, as we already have heard from Steen, about news values, and one of the news values is conflict. Mm-hmm. And conflict sells, kind of. So de-escalate the conflict by, and this is the second suggestion, by what I would call slow journalism. But it's very hard to make slow journalism in these times because it's all about being fastest, especially in the social media, without thinking. So the German expression Entschleunigung, the acceleration, slow journalism, could also come in here. And the last one is a story at the World Expo, the World in Shanghai. The original mermaid, the national symbol of Denmark, was transported to Shanghai, to the Danish pavilion, and was a gift for 3 months to the Chinese people. That gave an astonishing positive effect on the national image of Denmark in China.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, Dr. Michael Nevradakis, and was indeed, as Steen had said, had to do with our first day workshop, where we have talked about logos, pathos, and ethos. So we had there as well a wonderful interaction, and what I concluded, and what I would say as a Greek, is like giving your baby in UK, and if UK takes good care of this baby, the mother, who is Greece, is happy. So let's finish this with a positive meaning of collaboration, of exchange, and of love, because this is the most important, and this is the essence of this conference and of the mission and the vision of the Communication Institute of Greece. So we have 2 breakout rooms.